Shalom Uvracha to all of our listeners and viewers. We should like to continue with the series that we started a few weeks ago of Outer Limits. And the focus today will be on virtues and, unfortunately, vices. Point of departure will be the pasuk that we're all familiar with, the Sifri. In Parshas Feschanan says, Reb Meir Oimel, what exactly does that mean? So the Sifri says, we are mandated to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our entire hearts. And we bring a role model of Avram Avinu. After all, Avram's midah, his salient feature was Avram Oyavi. Because Baruch Hu said, Avram is my good friend, my companion, the one who loves me. So we are also commanded to the best of our ability to imitate Avram Avinu. How do we know that Avram Avinu had an undivided heart insofar as his love of the Kadosh Baruch Hu is concerned? It was total because the pasuk says, so according to the Sifri, this is what we have to have in mind, because this is exactly what each and every one of us is mandated. B'chol nafshecho ki Yitzchok. B'chol nafshecho is a reference to Yitzchok, that sacrificed himself on the Mizbeach voluntarily. He placed himself on the Mizbeach for Avram to slaughter him in fulfilling the divine commandment. So B'chol Nafshecha refers to Yitzchak. He's the role model for loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the extent of sacrificing everything that we have. And interestingly is we say B'chol Moedecha. So the Sifri explains what is B'chol Moedecha. Have a Moedeloi ki Yankiv. Moedecha is from the Lashon Hoido of acknowledgement, awareness on the one hand, and we'll see in a second also it means gratitude and thanksgiving. Where do we see that Yankiv was moida to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He acknowledged, he was aware, he realized something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed upon him, and therefore he acknowledged it. From this week's Parsha is Vayishlach, it says, Katonti mikol hachasodim, mikol ha'emes, asher asisa es avdecho, ki demakli avalti es yaldin hazeh, vato yisi v'shtei machnos. Well, Parsha Pshat is, Katonti, I am very small. I'm a very small person, and I simply am not roi, I don't deserve all the kindness and all the truth that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rendered to me. You have rendered to me, your servant. I crossed the Yarden with my staff, and now I have become two caps. So this is the Hidah of Yankiv Avinu. So Kol Moedecha is Lashon Moide. On the one hand, it's acknowledgement. On the other hand, it means expressing gratitude. When we speak of the term Hakaras HaTova, so the way it's generally used in the rabbinic literature and almost commonplace everyday language, it's that it means gratitude, or yidoya, or moida. Moida ni lefanecha, I thank you, Rabbeinu Shalom. I'm full of thanksgiving and gratitude for restoring my soul. However, from the Sifri, we see that before we express gratitude, before we express thanksgiving, So hoidoya means acknowledgement, realization, and awareness. Why? Because this is the very yisoid, very fundamental underpinnings and the very root of gratitude is realization. Realization on the part of the beneficiary, the Kabbalah Satoiv, the kindness and goodness that he received. And there's one element that prevents, it's an impediment, a real obstacle for a person to express gratitude to the one that bestowed it upon him. In other words, the beneficiary upon the benefactor, thanking him, expressing his gratitude. There's one barrier that prevents that, and that's simply not realizing that that which was bestowed upon him was good. He didn't realize it. How is that possible? We shall soon see. Or it's a simple denial that this was a Kabbalah Satoiva, this was a receiving good. And on the contrary, when there are no barriers, and the greater the individual's recognition and perception of the greatness of the kindness that was bestowed upon him, so to that extent will there be an increase, a tremendous increase in the hakaras hatoiva, in the gratitude and thanksgiving. Lashon HaKodesh consists of many wonders, and the expression of hoidah has two separate interpretations. On the one hand, it means moida, admitting, acknowledging, and not being kafir, not being in a state of denial. In the Gemara, we all know when a loiva, somebody who loaned money from somebody, is moida, admits that he owes the money to the malda, to his Baal Choiva, and he's not kafir, he does not deny it. But also it's Lashon Toido. Moida is also an expression of thanksgiving, of Hoido, for the Toivot that was received. And these are two Reyin Deloi Parsha. These are inseparable friends. They always go together. Because a person cannot come to an emotional expression of gratitude emanating from the deep recess of his heart unless first and foremost he has a hoidah of Lashon Moida. He admits through recognizing and being awareness of the Kabbalah Satoiva, of the goodness and kindness that he received. He was a beneficiary, because a kafir, somebody who denies, will never come to thanksgiving and gratitude. And that's what Yankov Avinu said, Katonki, Mikola Chasodim, and Mikola Emes. But Yossi says, Avdecho, this is both Hoidoye and Hoido. It's an acknowledgement and also an awareness that is the very basis of gratitude. He feels kotointi. He's very small. He's very insignificant. He does not have great importance. Does not see himself as a very important person. On the contrary, he sees himself modest, humble, kotointi. I'm a very small creature. And therefore, I am not worthy, not kedai, as we would say, for all the great chesed which HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed upon me. This is the way the Mefarshim explain this pasuk. And only through this feeling of kotainti, this modesty, humility, does Yankov Avinu realize the greatness of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed upon him. Kotainti mikol hachasodel mikol emes, and indeed, underlying this admission, recognition, is the greatest of hakaras hatoiva, because the implication is very simply, I don't deserve it. And there was such great munificence that was bestowed upon me. I just simply don't deserve it. So even though the Sifri understands it and interprets it to be acknowledgement and realization and admission, but this admission also consists of one of the greatest hakaras hatoiva of gratitude expressions to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's possible. We also see it by Leah. The pasuk says by Leah, by Toimel, Hapam Oides Hashem, Al Ken Krosh Shmo Yehuda, when she had her fourth child, so she called Yehuda because Rashi explains, B'Shem de Chazal, it was an expression of gratitude. Why? So Rashi explains very, very simply, because all the Moyes were Nevios. So why did she say, Hapam, this time, Oides Hashem, I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So Rashi says very simply, because they knew through the Nevuah that Yankov Avinu was destined to establish 12 Shvatim. And also through their Nevi'ah, says Rashi, each one thought that it would be 3 bonim to each one of the 4 wives. So when Yehuda, which was the 4th child that was born to Leah, so she said, and I quote Rashi, I took more than my chelik. My part was to have 3, 1/4. And with the 4th, so I have more than I deserve, much more than the Nevuah led me to believe. This is exactly what the Sifri says. The Shairesh, the very root, the fundamental underpinnings of hakaras hatoiva, of gratitude, is the submission and the hisbatlus and the kotainti that brings a person to the deep-seated feeling of the greatness of the Kabbalah of what he received, the great toiva, kotainti mikol hachasodim imikol emes. This is above and beyond what I deserve. Never dreamt of such a thing. And we know that in this week's Parsha, we have a very, very strange episode. We don't understand it. Vayivosel Yankov levado. All of a sudden, Yankov was in total isolation. He remained by himself. We don't understand why. He had 2 big machanois. How is it that all of a sudden he was thrust into isolation? So the Gemara asked this question in the Chulin, Daf Tzadik Aleph. And the Gemara tells us that he was choyzer al tachin ketan. He left very simple jars behind, and even though the machane had advanced to a different location, he went to retrieve these jars. Mikan amru Chazal. Chazal tell us this episode, and this incident tells us one of the great insights of what's a righteous man. Mikan omru tzadikim chov v'aleim amoinim yosem igufo v'shein poishtim yedeim begezel. From here we learn that tzadikim, righteous people, it is more appreciative to them. They are more appreciative of their financial possessions more than their physical existence. In other words, on a scale of values, so their possessions exceed the level of their own physical welfare. Why is that? Very strange formula. So Chazal say the Fishem Persian Yidei Begezel because they simply restrain themselves from taking something which doesn't belong to them. So this, of course, is very strange, as the Marsha points out. If we say tzaddikim, we speak about tzaddikim, and we're praising tzaddikim for the midas that they have. So what is the praise that we see by Yaakov Avinu, that he went back to retrieve a few jars? Because ein poishkim yidei begezel. So the implication is that what are tzaddikim, what is their salient feature? What are they going to be praised for? Because they're very, very meticulous not to take something which belongs to someone else, not to be over Isha Gezel. So the Marsha finds this very difficult. In addition, the Marsha points out we have to understand why Yaakov Avinu, that now left Lovan with a lot of possessions. He was a wealthy man. He had 2 machanois, cattle, money. Why would he go back for Pachim Ketanim? We would never do such a thing. Now, the answer is, Marsha tells us this quite emphatically, what exactly is the greatest virtue we can ascribe to righteous people? So that is the submission, a hachno, and a bittul, self-negation, and the hargosha, the feeling, but there has to be a true feeling of kotointi mikola chasodim umikola emes asher sises adecho. To put it in legalistic terms, loy bedin ani noitel. According to the strict scale of justice, I don't deserve it, and therefore bedin, I do not deserve this, that which I'm taking, that which I have. That is the lashon of the Yeshua's Yankiv, Kiloi Bedin Hu Noitel. Elo, so what is his feeling? Chesed Hashem, the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Choyfef Olav Kol HaYoim, encompasses him all day. Chesed Hashem, Choyfef Olav Kol HaYoim Kuloi. And from that recognition that everything which we have are toivos from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these are his chasadim. So therefore we are moide, we give thanksgiving, and we praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every single toiva. So Yaakov Avinu, of course, was on the madrega, like Chazal say, Al kol neshima neshima ta'aloko. Every single breath a person has to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was on that madrega. He said himself, "Kotointi mikol chesed." And Tita and Emes Yaakov only spoke the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That which he felt himself to be small, insignificant, kotointi. Insofar as the Kabbalah Sachasodim is concerned, so this reached very, very far, to the very outskirts of recognition that everything is chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the gvul, to the boundary of Pachim Ketanim. Because also the chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did with him by giving him a few jars, very minute, we would say, is a chesed Hashem olov. So he looked at it and he experienced that itself, every toiva, every individual in the separate toiva as being a special gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to him. And had he refused to go back and look for the Pachim Ketanim, but he would do what we would do. He'd be mafkir them. He would renounce his ownership over them. So Yankov Avinu would have the feeling that he is mizalzel. He's treating this toiva like Hakadosh Baruch Hu granted him very lightly, as if he doesn't need it. Hakadosh Baruch Hu granted it, and he simply dismisses it. And therefore, if he dismisses it because he doesn't need it, so he doesn't have a need to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for it. And that is why he was Chazar Apachim Ketanim. The deep-seated feeling that that's also Chesed Hashem, and if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave it to him, he does need it, and he, God forbid, will not in any way treat it lightly and show that he doesn't need it and not thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for it. This is the way the Mefarshim explained this Gemara in Chulin Daf Tzadik Aleph. This is the klal of the Sifri. Because it's impossible for us to reach this madrega unless we understand exactly what the Sifri means. It's interesting that first and foremost we have Hafta Hashem Elokecha, that's Avas Hashem. Paradigmatic example, of course, is Avram Avinu. And then we have Yitzchak, Chol Nafshecha, that's self-sacrifice. And then we have Yankov, Katanki Mikol Chasadim. It would appear that there's an order here. There's a sequential order. In order to reach the Madreg of Yankov Avinu, B'chayzer of Pachim Ketanim, Katanki Mikol Chasadim, first and foremost, a person has to come to Avas Hashem. And like the Ramban said, the Derech HaPshat, a different pshat of the Sifri, but it is very, very relevant to the pshat of the Sifri. Misha'oyeves Hashem b'chol ma'oidoi. Somebody who loves the HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol ma'oidoi, with all of his possessions, everything. So the Avas Hashem that precedes it, that will enable him to come to the feeling that everything he has is an expression of the chavivus and ava that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for him. Ad me'oid me'oid, Avas Hashem will bring a person to have a tremendous recognition of who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is and how every taiva is much more than he deserves. We see in this week's Parsha someone else. And this is in juxtaposition to Leah, because by Leah we have a very difficult ending of the pasuk. After she called Yehuda, the fourth son, I took more than my part, my share of the Yud Beis Shvatim. It's much more a realization she doesn't deserve it, she's not worthy for it. So the pasuk says, "Shema Yehuda," and every Jew has to have that feeling. He's called a Yehudi because of that reason. Nevertheless, we do not understand. After it says that Shekaro Shema Yehuda, she called him Yehuda Vatamoid Miledes. What does it come to teach us? That she stopped giving birth. What does it come to teach us? The Mefarshim asked this question. Very admirable that she said, Notalti Yosef Michelki, like Rashi says. I took more than is due me. So what could possibly be the reason why the Torah now tells us that Talmud Aleda, she stopped giving birth? So the answer is that we have over here a very interesting juxtaposition between Leah and Rachel. We're not coming to try to understand Leah or Rachel, we're just trying to understand what we can derive from a lesson from Rachel to Leah. The Ramban tells us, what is the purpose for Nisim Gluyim? What's the very purpose for Nisim, right, that Jewish people experienced by Yetzias Mitzrayim? It's not an end unto itself. Of course, it's very important, but it's not the end. Nisim Gedolim, for some, great miracles, great revelations are necessary for another end. It's a means to an end. And what is that end? That from the Nisim, Hanistorim, the Gedolim, Odomoide, Lashon Shel Ramban, this is the words of the Ramban, a person is moide ala Nisim Hanistorim. Yesh lo lohoida is benisim hanistorim. On occasion, a person needs some sort of inspiration, a motivation. Life sometimes goes by mechanically compulsive. People don't think. So on occasion, we have revelation of God's grandeur, God's majesty. This brings us to thinking, and this is what our thought process should be. Nisim ha-gedolim ha-meforsamim or the moide ba-nisim ha-nistar. Why is this important? Because kol mikreinu dvareinu einu el nisim nistar. Klal Yisrael does not have laws of nature, says the Rambam. We don't live by teva. Even the things that we think are teva, are nature, and they abide by the laws of nature, they're also nisim, they're nisim nistarim. They are concealed miracles. Jewish people have a special havogah. These are concealed miracles as opposed to revealed miracles. And the purpose for revealed miracles is to tell us that we live on a daily basis with concealed miracles. And the Ramban adds that somebody does not believe in this, he does not have a part, does not share in Teres Moshe. To that extent, this is an important principle. So why was it Vatamid Loledes? Why? Tamid Miledes, she stopped. It's very abrupt ending to a very, very beautiful expression of gratitude. Because when a person sees a revealed miracle, somebody sees something great that was bestowed upon him. We're talking about the Ovis HaKadoshim, Yud Bei Shiftei Kol, the 12 Shvatim. So she was singled out, selected to be the mother of more than anyone else. She has 4. No one will have 4. So this was just like she saw a revealed miracle. So what should have taken place? She should have also thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the nisim and the star and for all the mundane, good happenings that happen on a daily basis. Because when you have something great and outstanding that happens to you, so there's a feeling of Kilvas Hashem Li Toiv. Oh, you feel the closeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you feel how good it is. But the purpose is in order to perceive, recognize that everything is Chazdei Hashem. And His Toivas are B'chol Eisu, B'chol Shol, like we say in Moedim Anachnu Lo, Boiker, Tzarayim, Ba'erev, morning, afternoon, and evening, everything is chasodim. And if we do not recognize it, so we learned a very, very valuable lesson. So that causes a cessation of the miracles. So therefore it says, Vatamon miledes, abruptly. Who rose to the occasion? Who understood this klal of the Ramban better than anyone else? So of course that's Rachel Imenu. Because Rachel Imenu says, after the Pasuk said, Vatav, Vateva Ben, Vatemer, Osa B'Lekim Escher Pasi, because Baruch gathered in my busha, so Rashi says, because she didn't have children, it was very shameful for her. Svarna says that her tefillos were not answered, but Rashi says something strange. Calls Manshein the Isha Ben, as long as a mother, a wife does not become a mother and have a child, so she has nobody to ascribe the blame. She has a child, so she can ascribe the blame to the child. Husband comes home, who broke the kli, so she'll answer, your son. He's the scapegoat. You can blame it on him. Who ate the te'enim, the figs that I wanted to eat, your son. So the question is, this is what Rachel wanted the son for? Somebody to blame? Because Baruch gathered in my shame when I have a confrontation with my husband, so I'll have who to blame it on. So that's what the words mean. Answer is no. Of course, Rachel Imenu appreciated what it is to have a child, and she said already before, complained of Libonim, the ayin Mason, I prefer to die if I don't have children. So obviously this is not the reason she wanted children. Nobody realized more than Rachel Imenu what it is to have one of the shiftei kol. That's not the answer. The answer is that Rachel Imenu understood intuitively the Ramban. And when there's an overwhelming feeling of Ani Kiras Hashem Li Toiv, I have something which I feel I don't deserve, Katointi, so that has to lead a person not only to thank for the revealed kindness that he had, for the revealed miracle that he had, but also there has to be a means to an end. He has to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the tevis, all the single tevis that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestows upon him morning, afternoon, and nighttime. So the pshat is that with Lezer Yudel Finkel, Zechet Tzaddik B'Kadosh Livracha, one that was Miyaseh the Miri Yeshiva, so he said that the Hakaras HaToiva of Rachel Imenu was so long and included every single possible element, even who to blame some sort of failing to her husband on. In other words, if the Torah would have recorded the expressions of Hakaras HaToiva of Rachel Imenu, it would have been 5 books of Moses. That's how much it contained. So the Torah decided only to formulate her last expression of gratitude. Even for the most minutest thing, she thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu for, because the purpose of having Ani Kiras Hashem Li Tov is not to exhaust Hakaras HaToiva for that itself, but it should be a means to an end, a springboard to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every Tov for Hashem Tov. This Rachel Imenu achieved with very, very lofty levels. And it's interesting that the one who was the opposite of Katointi was Lavan. Lavan is the paradigmatic example of an ingrate, a malcontent, who will never be grateful to anybody because he doesn't have to come on to anybody. He's self-sufficient. He doesn't need anybody. He's not dependent on anybody. He doesn't need a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't need anybody, and he says it after Yaakov Avinu proved to him, 20 years I worked for you. And Yaakov Avinu, only because it was annoyed that he quarreled. And he said, 20 years I've been with you. And look at all the goats and sheep and cattle I brought to you. Flocks upon flocks. You didn't have anything beforehand, and I brought you all of this. And I made sure by working day and night, in the cold of the night, the heat of the day, that not one isolated sheep should be torn asunder by a wolf. The heat of the day consumed me, and the frost of the night. I had no sleep. 20 years I spent in your house, served 14 years for your daughter, 6 years for your animals. You changed my wages 10 times over. Not a Kadosh Baruch Hu, my father, been there for me. You would have sent him away open-handed, empty-handed. Kadosh Baruch Hu saw my affliction, the toil of my hands, and he reproved you. And he told you, don't touch Yaakov Avinu. He was ready to slaughter, commit manslaughter, his daughter, Yaakov, and all the children. That's the evilness. But what was his reply? Yaakov abonois benoisai, va'abonim bonai, va'atzoin tzoini, v'chol asher tochoyer lihu. The sons are my sons, animals are my animals. All that you see is mine. Who doesn't have to come on to anybody. Everything is his. We don't understand the reply. Only way we can understand the reply, if it makes any sense to us, is that he says he deserves all this. He did nothing for me. Everything is mine. I don't see anybody else. I'm not dependent on you. It would have happened anyway. Everything is mine. Everything you see over here is mine. This is gaiva. This is pure arrogance. This is pure haughtiness. And the worst is that there is total denial of the truth. He could not admit the truth, that he's dependent on Yaakov Avinu. He's dependent on other people. He's not self-sufficient. He has to come on to the chasodim of the Kadosh Baruch Hu all the time. He's simply a koifel b'toiv. Total denial.